Look at me. I'm spiritual. I'm spiritual. Oh yeah, look at me, everybody. Look at how spiritual I am. I'm really spiritual. I'm spiritual. I'm spiritual. I'm ascending. Oh yeah, look at me. Right? Look at me. I'm spiritual. That's who I am. That's what me is. I am spiritual. Yeah. That's who I am. That's my personality, right? That's my concept about what constitutes the self. In my case, I am spiritual. Yeah. And because I am spiritual, that proves that I'm better than you and more compassionate than you are. And and you are not spiritual, and that proves that you're bad. Yeah. Yeah. Now, what am I talking about? Am I just up here being silly? Well, yes, I am being silly, but also, I had a thought the other day. You can't really define what is spiritual, but you can kind of define what isn't, right? And I think I've already made my point in the first 45 seconds of this video, right? But let's litigate a little bit. So, and I've been up here for a while talking about this, pointing out that being nice does not a spiritual person make. Being mean does not necessarily mean that you are not spiritual. What if somebody is trying to rip you off or take advantage of you, physically hurt you, and you get angry about that? Well, you were angry, and everybody knows that in order for you to be spiritual, you have to be nice all the time and never tell people that it's not okay for them to not take advantage of you, and you just have to take it. You know, like, I don't know, Gandhi or something. Oh yeah, Gandhi, he just let people walk all over him and take advantage of him, and that's not even true. But people have this impression that in order to be spiritual, you are required to act a certain way. Watch this. Almost every single human on planet Earth approaches things backwards. I gotta do such and such things, and then I will have such and such whatever in order to be whatever, right? I gotta be nice to people. I gotta wear certain clothes. I gotta eat a certain diet. I gotta drive a certain car. I have to be conscientious of whatever, you know, the environment, or I have to not ever get upset, ever. You're not allowed to be angry, even if somebody's hurting you. And then I'll have this persona. People are going to look at me like I'm spiritual, right? So I got to do some things in order to have that. In order to be spiritual, it's always in order to, right? And that's just kind of the way everybody does things. Nobody really ever thinks twice about that humans always do that. It's just what we've always done, right? And even people in the so-called general spiritual community, they look at things like that. You see that all the time, right? And it's kind of a mistake, I guess, that people are making, right? And this is why I said that you can't really define what is spiritual, but you can sort of define what it's not, okay? So I'm talking about what spiritual is not, for sure. We know that seeking being through doing and having is not spiritual. Okay, now what is spiritual is possibly this: be, do, have. Start with being, be spiritual, and then you'll do or have what spiritual people do and have. Okay, and it doesn't matter what order doing and having go in, as long as you start with being. Now, what is spiritual? I mean, can I be more precise? Yeah, sort of. Let's try this. Spirit is soul, right? You're a soul. You are spirit, soul. I'm using those words interchangeably. You could argue from a pure semantics place, purely semantics, which means we're playing around with the meaning of words. you could argue that soul and spirit are different things, but that's just semantics. That's just playing around with the definition of the words that you're using, right? So I want to be clear about that there's a language barrier. I want to get past the language barrier. I don't want to argue with you about the meaning of the words, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll just say that spirit and soul are kind of the same, or they're related, or whatever. All right, you guys, you know what I mean. Don't make things complicated. Okay, listen. So soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it, is consciousness. It's life. It is life. That's what I'm getting at here. Never mind the semantics. Never mind the words, okay? Consciousness, being, life itself, awareness, consciousness, focus, awareness, being, presence, your existence, your very life, right? There's thoughts and feelings, and you see that there are thoughts and feelings going on inside your body, inside your head. I feel good, bad, love, fear, anxiety, joy, whatever. I'm thinking these thoughts, right? But here's the thing. There is a you. There is a you who is seeing the thoughts and feelings going on. Right, there's awareness, there is consciousness. What is that? Well, that's the soul, right? That's spiritual, okay? Actual spirit, actual soul, right? Okay, so now I guess we can kind of say what spiritual really is, but here's the thing. Consciousness is not thought. So if consciousness is not thought, the soul is consciousness, right? But it's not thought. Consciousness is not thought. And we're clear about what a thought is. A thought is a form. It's a label. It's a description, right? Now, the mind is what's going to say that this is this thing and this is that thing. This is my hand. These are my glasses, right? And when I see somebody doing something, I could be looking at the doing that's going on, and I could say, oh, well, that's a really spiritual thing to do. Really, is it now? Because that's an idea. That's a thought. That's a perception. And I'm not saying that's bad. That's just what that is, right? But consciousness is not thought. Spiritual is not thought. Spiritual is awareness. It's consciousness. It's being, attention, focus, the actual observing presence of the thoughts and the emotions. The thoughts and the emotions are thoughts and emotions. They're ideas, they're concepts, right? And to say that this thing is spiritual and this thing over here is not spiritual, those are concepts. And so by the very definition of spiritual, those things are not spiritual. Saying that this thing is spiritual is not actually spiritual. And saying that this thing is spiritual is not spiritual. This is spiritual, this is not spiritual. How do you know that? Because that's a concept. Oh, this is spiritual, but this isn't. That's an idea, that's a belief, that's thought. That's thought, and I'm not saying that's bad, that's just what that is. Okay? Consciousness is not thought. So you can't really define spiritual other than to say it's consciousness. But a definition is a thought. When you define something, you define it, you give it a shape, you give it form, structure. That's a concept, that's a thought, it's a definition. And you can't do that with consciousness. Consciousness is not thought, it's not able to be defined. This is spiritual, this is not spiritual. Well, that's duality, that's the mind, that's a concept. Okay? So you can't actually define spiritual. Okay? You just can't, because a definition is a thought, it's a belief, and consciousness is not thought. So you literally, no matter what you do, you're going to keep chasing this rabbit down the rabbit hole and you'll never catch it. You'll never catch it, okay? So you can't really have an opinion about what is spiritual. You can't look at somebody and say, oh, their actions are spiritual or they are not spiritual. You can be spiritual, but you already are spiritual. You're life. You are life. Now, you can kind of define what is not spiritual, and here's what I mean. When somebody says this is spiritual and this is not spiritual, is what they are doing spiritual? Are they like, when somebody says, oh, I'll tell you what spiritualism is, and then they start telling you this is and this isn't, is the act of trying to define spiritual for you spiritual? Let me say that again. Listen up. Is the act of trying to define what is or isn't spiritual spiritual? No, that's not spiritual. Now, you could look at me and go, well, Kurt, that's not spiritual either because you're trying to say that something isn't spiritual. And you're right. You're absolutely right. Do you see? Do you see? Now, this is pure philosophy, this video, which, I mean, that's what this channel is all about, right? But that's the thing, guys. You can't define spiritual no matter what you do. No matter what you do. We can look at things and we can go, well, that's not spiritual. And I just know that's not spiritual. Because when I see somebody who's claiming to have the answer to the question, what is spiritual? I can look at that act and say, that's not really spiritual, guy. You can't really define spiritual, so I'm not going to listen to you, okay? I know that's not spiritual. But the irony is, in that same light, I'm not being spiritual when I say that about the other person. Does that make sense? So, once again, I'm looking at my own actions and I'm recognizing that that's not technically spiritual either. Now, the noticing might be spiritual. Observing, noticing, consciousness, awareness, focus, awareness, being. That's spiritual. Being, awareness, consciousness. Okay? You could say that that's spiritual, but that's all your perspective. Okay? You're making it all up. But there is a you who is making it all up. There is a you who is making it all up. You just need to be aware, conscious of that. You need to be aware of that. It's always bringing the focus back to, oh, I am. It's not that you are out here, some abstract idea of what the self is. You're not looking at yourself from outside, looking at yourself, going, oh, I see who I am. No, you are the seer. You're always bringing it back to that. You're always bringing it back to I am. I am the seer. You follow me? It's never externalized. Oh, I see who I am. I see that I am the seer. Look at that. I'm looking at me and I'm noticing that I am the seer. No, you're not. You're noticing that you're the noticer from the vantage point of the actual noticer. Does that make sense? I thought so. Thank you very much for watching. I hope I made your brain hurt today. Have a nice rest of your week. Bye.